Do you love spontaneous adventures, travel tips, and epic stories to make you want to go travelling? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, host James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll bring you travel tales, practical advice, and awesome anecdotes for some of the most well-travelled and diverse travellers from around the globe. Whether you're thinking about planning a big trip or even dreaming of one, you're in the right place. Because I combine unforgettable moments and epic fails. Because travel is not perfect, and that's what makes it glorious. Don't forget to tune in every Monday on any podcast platform or YouTube. So grab your backpack and let's wing it around the world. See you then. Welcome to this week's episode. This is with Rich de Gouveia from Arc Earth Travel. And Rich joins me for over an hour talking about the most amazing travel adventures that he has had and what he offers now in the modern day. He is a photographer, private tour guide, and business owner. He grew up in South Africa admiring the marvellous nature around him, and after a stint in the corporate world decided that he had to go and work within nature, and now, decades on, he has his own business, he offers the most amazing experiences, and today on this episode he talks about the big five, poaching, photography, running a business, what rangers do, how we can help the ecosystem, responsible animal tourism, what they can offer in terms of you going on a trip there, and much more. So it's a super engaging chat, a really positive vibe to it, and Rich just loves animals, travel, photography, and I believe he should inspire you to go and travel the world in the future. But no further ado, let's go straight in to Rich's episode. Cheers. Rich de Gouveia, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks, James. Thank you so much for having me.
And please tell our listeners where you're based right now.
I'm in the Algarve in Portugal, which is not the worst space in the world to be. And my commute back to work now is much longer. We've only been here for about 18 months, but I've got a long commute back to Africa for a lot of my trips.
That's actually going to be my next question. Some people might know you as being based in Africa. So how has Portugal come about? Why Portugal?
A change, adventure. I think travel's so well ingrained in who I am, and Africa's got its own constraints, and where I lived in South Africa and where I was born and raised, and my heart still lies and a lot of our family still sits there. It was all about just trying to create new options and say we'd lived in a space other than one space. So I think just traveling opens your mind to so much that I wanted more, and I wanted my kids to explore a little bit more of that.
How does that work with like visas or moving from South Africa or where you're based before to Portugal? Because obviously people might be saying, well, you know, they'd like to live in Portugal, but it's always the visa question, right? Or the passport question.
Yeah, I was lucky because my grandparents on my dad's side are Portuguese. So I have a passport through descendancy, and so do my kids. And then my wife can tag along, and she's on the roll anyway. So it was an easy move. It was one of those that we could just say, okay, cool, let's pack our bags and go. We didn't have to ask. Everything was sort of put in place already.
That's amazing, because Portugal is a great spot, isn't it?
It's it seems to be the world is trying to get in here because it's this piece of tranquility, and it is something about it that is so different to Johannesburg, big city, this rush of chaos that I'm so used to. And then coming to the Algarve, where don't try and do any shopping between 12 and 2 because it's siesta time and people are having a beer and having lunch with their families. And you go, well, that's not bad. It's not a bad thing to aim for.
Yeah, and I think when I was traveling last year in Lebanon with a Portuguese tour group, they're called 100 Rotas Viagem. I think those guys were telling me that, that even, like you say, if it's lunchtime, they're going out for a meal or glass of wine. Because Canada's so expensive, which you'll find out, I guess, in December when you go. When you go for a glass of wine here, it's going to be $6, $7, $8, right? But like, oh no, we just buy one for like €1, €2. Like just the cheapness, the coming together. It's not a big thing to think about. You just go casually. Where here you have to plan, maybe, can we go this week, or do you wait for 2 weeks when we get paid, whatever. Just different lifestyle, and it looks great.
Totally. And I think that all is so appealing to me because the world is in this absolute rush to try and make something monumental and fill a bank account. We've all forgotten about this idea of actually just having some time.
Yeah.
And Portugal does that. For me, the craziest thing here is that beer is cheaper than water. Yes. And you've got, so what? So
I think we experienced that last
space.
year in Madeira. We went, so we had a year trip last year, and the last place was Madeira. We thought, you know what, December U K, not great. Let's go to Madeira. It's going to be mild, maybe even warm. We had a nice Airbnb, swimming pool. Just down the road, there's like a local cafe. It's definitely away from the tourist part. And you do go in, and it is €1.25 for a beer, or €1.50. And it's like a proper beer. It's not like anything rubbish. It's like, this is amazing. Can't get my head around it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does, like I said, it has added a commute onto work for me, which a lot of people go, but why would you want to do that? I have done about 40 flights this year alone, but that's including little planes. But I've done a lot of international flights. Yeah. And I love it just based on the fact that I get to disconnect myself from my family environment and prepare myself for work. And then when I'm leaving work, I get excited about coming home and have that one day or 20 hours to disconnect from being on for guests and be ready for my kids and my wife when I get home.
Sounds like the perfect scenario, because we're all in this world post-COVID where we work in the same place that we live. And I'm not against working at home. I think it works for a lot of reasons, but having an outdoor job like yours, which we'll come to, which sounds incredible, you do get to have that different parts of your life, and you can switch in between the two. And I think that's so important and so incredible, just for your own mental health, but also for the people around you as well.
Totally. And I think a lot of what I do is not just showing people amazing spaces with incredible wildlife. It is about that connection back into that. It is about taking people out of that mundane, every day, the same story over and over. And I heard a wonderful thing about memory and about time and our perception of time, that it is time's a perception based on how many memories we create in a space of time. The more memories we create in a year, the longer the year will feel, because you have milestones along the way to measure yourself against. Whereas when you are doing the same job in your same office, in the same house, every day, it feels like that year disappears like this because there's no new memories. It's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I think I do struggle with that, to be honest. Yeah, it's a big struggle. I think next year's going to be possibly some big changes about how I go about working in, with their travel space and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. It's day in, day out, and it can get just a little bit, I guess it's cabin fever, I guess. I mean, you can always go out for a walk, and then, that's obviously good. But like you say, every day, five out of 7 days is the same, right? I go in one day a week, so that is different, but even that's the same. So yeah, I guess the sense of adventure is not really there.
Yes, exactly. And I think, again, with the move that we've made to Portugal, there's so many new memories. We've been here for 18 months, but it feels like we've been here for 10 years.
Yeah.
Because you're learning constantly, and new language and new barriers and outside the comfort zone. And I think travel in general is about stepping outside of the comfort zone and getting to that point where it's not normal.
Yeah.
So you're present. You're not thinking about what you did yesterday or what you need to do next week. You're like, I got to get through passport control now. This guy needs my visa and he doesn't look very happy. Or he looks very happy and this is awesome. High five the guy and you move on. It just depends which guy you get.
It's funny you say that, because the first memory that comes to my mind about the passport control, right, we go for a little bit here, is last year I was going through customs in Turkey, and the guy got the passport and he looked at me a couple of times, right, and spoke broken English. I didn't understand him correctly, but what I thought he said at the time was, your picture's very beautiful. I was like, oh, is that he, right? I was like, oh, thanks. And he was confused by my response. I was like, that's a weird one. And then he sort of gave me a passport, stamped it and went off. But on reflection, because I was kind of flustered in the moment. In reflection, I think he said, oh, your passport is very different. Passport photo is very different to me now, which it would be 8 years ago, right? I was in mid-20s then. But I thought he said beautiful. So it's a really strange memory, but one I do remember quite clearly. I think the guy says beautiful, Emma, like my partner. It's like, it's a bit strange, isn't it? I've never been told that at border control before.
But it is
weird. But yeah,
I think
they're the memories, right? Yeah.
Always an interesting space. I remember we were crossing the border into Rwanda, and there were 3 people who weren't part of my group who were coming through, and they said that they got visas from East Africa, tourist visas.
Okay.
But the guy was saying, listen, you don't. And they started to argue with the guy. And I walked up to them. I was like, ladies, do you really want to go to Rwanda? Because arguing is not going to get you in. Just pay the money and move along. Passport control is passport control.
Yeah. I mean, that comes with experience though, right? I guess, I don't know if they're experienced travelers or they're quite stubborn, but you having that knowledge of the area, I guess, enables you to say that, right? And but I think arguing is, I mean, you really got to be calm at passport control, because what's the worst that's going to happen? You can't go in. Doesn't matter for them. Exactly. They're just working, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, let's delve back into your history. Love to hear about South Africa and where you grew up. And when you're growing up, I assume there's a sense of adventure there, because you have South Africa as a great country. There's a lot of outdoor activities. So what was growing up like, and was there travel interest early doors?
So life in South Africa was beautiful, is beautiful. It's an unbelievable country that I think everyone should visit at some stage in their life, just because of the variety of space, the beauty of the people. And I grew up through that a changeover of apartheid into democracy, and it was a different time. I think there was a lot of ebb and flow, but as a kid, I mean, I was 12, 13 years old at that stage. It really didn't enter into, I wasn't watching the news every day.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky that I was brought up in a middle-class home with good schooling, and I had a lot of privilege. I come from privilege in the sense of what other people in South Africa had. And I was exposed to the outdoors for a long time. I can remember my first memories. My parents had a timeshare unit in a reserve called the Pilansberg, which is just outside of Johannesburg. It's about an hour and a half drive away. And this space meant so much to me. Every time we went, I would just glow. There was a hide underneath the ground, so you had to walk about 500 yards underground through these concrete culverts, and I can still hear the echo of the footsteps as you're walking down this thing, to a point where you sit and there's a water hole out away from the hotel area, and you could just sit and watch. And I would spend hours, James, just sitting watching antelope come in. And it was one of those things where you go, I haven't done that in years, just sat quietly for hours. When was the last time anyone did that?
Nature,
exactly.
Yeah.
And those memories stuck with me, and we could go on safaris, on game drives every day. And I'd hop on the vehicle and I'd jump in the front seat next to the guide. And the poor guy his ear would be swollen by the time he got back, because I would just chew it off with questions, like 100 questions, as often as possible, as much as possible, and just inhale the information. And I remember sitting there going, one day I want to be a guide. That's what I would like to be a ranger. That's what we call a guide in South Africa. And a family friend also owned a game farm without Big Five. It just had antelope but a lot of nature. And we used to, as kids, go out and take the .22 rifle with snake shot, because they were paranoid about snakes, that a snake was going to come and get us.
Yeah.
And which was, in my experience now, it's the least of our worries out there. But we used to just go walk and just be outside and drive a pickup truck where I was looking through the little gap under the steering wheel, because I was 10 years old and sitting on a box trying to reach pedals. Great memories of outdoors, but all while living in a big city. While living in a big city, your brain is programmed to everyone else's. It's about chase the money, get the degree, do those things. And there was a lot of pressure from my father to get a degree. It was the one thing that he never did, and his regret spilt over onto me. And for me, first year university was the best 3 years of my life, because I couldn't decide which way I wanted to go. So I kept on having to change it. And that wasn't a great thing for him.
No.
And we came to loggerheads over this whole thing. And I eventually found my route. I'm like, I need to do something that involves environment. How can I make money and live a good life while doing something positive for the environment? And I decided environmental consulting was a great way to go. do environmental impact assessments. You're really getting down to the nitty gritty. You're helping legal processes. You're making sure that companies are held to their due diligence so that they don't wreck the environment, that we save something for the future generation. Yeah, I'm pumped. And the year that my parents passed away, that September, or it was like June or July, somewhere there, I can't remember the exact month, but I was out on the golf course. I had signed or filled in a form for a bursary, for a scholarship with our power utilities company. Filled it in just because if you don't buy a ticket, you never win a prize, and I sent it. And I walked away because there was no way I was getting it. I was a 50% student. 50% is a pass, 51% a distinction, 52% you're avoiding your friends. That was just the way it all went. And I said, okay, bye. And the next thing, my dad comes up on a golf cart. He's like, they've just phoned me. You have the interview now. What do you mean they just phoned? So I went to this interview for this bursary in my golf getup, in my golf shoes. And I walked in and I asked the guy next to me, I was like, hey, he was in my class too. There was 3 of us that were there. He was like, yeah, I did all this research and this is, so I listened to what he said and I got to go in first. So I gave all his information first and I got the bursary. And my dad suddenly, this was a big change for us because suddenly he knew that I was going to achieve that goal. And that was a big relief for him. It was a great relief on us. We had a great conversation and cleared the air, which is, thank God, that happened before they passed away. But it was a huge moment. And being in that, my parents then passed away in the tsunami in Thailand, which was obviously somewhat traumatic.
Oh, wow. Crikey.
And that left its own mark. Without it, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And I'm not sad that it happened because I get to do what I love every day. But it drove me into a deep, dark depression. And working for a parastatal company that wasn't big on work ethic, I could do all my work in like 2 days and look like I'd done a month's worth of epicness. And I was just circling the toilet the whole way. Yeah. Drugs, depression, it wasn't going in the right direction. Eventually I was like, okay, cool. I'm out. I'm gonna make something of my life because life's too short. I've just realized, or I've seen that life's too short. Yeah. It's time to get out. So I go on and I'm like, I'm going to be a game ranger. I'm going to go do this. It was my childhood dream. Let me go do this. And then we can come back to earning money later. And I clicked on the websites. I was looking for a job. And the jobs were all about $200 a month was the pay. And I was like, I have a car allowance. I have like 50 days of leave. I don't have to work hard. I make good money. So I'll just change my job and it'll make me happier. And it didn't. Had a breakup with a girlfriend that sent me spiraling even deeper, very close to the end of. I very much considered taking my own life at that point. Suicide was very much on the cards. It just wasn't a space I wanted to be in, and I took the plunge. It's like, well, let's try this before we go and remove ourselves from the equation altogether. And I left everything, and everyone just looked at me. You're doing what? And fortunately, my family were gracious about it. They're like, it's just a passing phase. He'll get over it. 15 years later, I'm still getting over it. And I remember walking into my training space, which was a house in the middle of the bush in a reserve called the Mkalali. And it was a little old farmhouse. And I moved from having my own 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, beautiful spot, to sharing a room with 3 other guys in bunk beds and having a metal box as my cupboard. And I've never been happier.
There you go.
And it all just unfolded from there.
Depression left me. There's a great lesson there, isn't there, about loads to unpack there. But what I'm going with this comment is that the materialistic side that you mentioned about this need that we keep getting told about getting a degree. Obviously, you have your house, your career, your job. There's something to be said about that's just not enough for some people, even maybe for the majority of people who don't want to admit it. But there has to be something in a different way of life that needs to be accepted, because I do get the feeling that if someone like yourself is doing that, you are looked down upon in society because it's not normal, and you're kind of a bit of an outlier in that respect. And anyone who does anything different to the norm anyway, whether that could be me just doing podcasting and want to go into podcasting or whatever, it's kind of, oh, you're doing that? Well, how much money does it make? It's like, why is it always the first question with money? Like, my dad is the first thing he says. Like when I said, if I told him, I interviewed Rich today, he's the guy who's got tours in Africa, he's gone viral on TikTok, he lives in, he works and lives in nature, he lives in Portugal. And I think his first question was, oh, great, like, how much do you get paid in that episode? I'm like, why is that the first thing? Like, what? But I guess we are, as a society, kind of been brought up that way, right?
It's our measuring stick. We always comparing ourselves. And again, there's so many, I like listening to podcasts and being part of this because there's so many cool things that get discussed. And if you look back 200 years, 500 years ago, we had a village that had 1,000 people in it. And if you were a blacksmith, you were probably the best or the second best blacksmith in the town. Measure ourselves against 8 billion people. And there's no wonder that we feel inadequate because there's so many people doing what we're doing. Even now for you as a podcaster, for me as a guide, I'm competing across a range of people that all have the same resources, the same thought process, the same outlook. It's just got to do with work ethic. And I don't even think it's about work ethic. I think it's about how nice you are to people.
Yeah,
I honestly
100%.
think just being a nice guy and not chasing after stuff opens doors and you can walk through them.
But it's crazy that seems a bit unusual to say, but I just think niceties is not in the world right now. I think we are just struggling a little bit as a collective to be nice, and it's quite strange that we're even saying that. I don't even understand it either. But
no,
the value here of this hour and a half is the value of the conversation. I get to know you, you get to know me. We have a chat about a common interest. Like, that is worth a lot more than just a monetary value that goes into your account every month. But some people can't see that or don't accept it.
Yeah, because again, I think the fear base of not having the money is just as scary to somebody as they'd rather not know the people around them and feel secure within their own walls. And I come from a place which, South Africa, we had walls. We had walls with electric fences around it. So you made sure that the rest of the world couldn't get in there. You only opened the doors for people you wanted in there. And even moving to Portugal, going on my safaris where we meet so many different souls, so many different cultures, you can break that boundary. You can have a conversation with someone. You can say, how's your day? What does your day entail? How's your family? How do you live? You've got 20 kids. That's freaking amazing. I've just come back from Kenya now, and we're talking about the Maasai and the proliferation of humans. If you have money, there's a guy there that has 70 children. It's just in Western culture, we're going, just say that again, because I think you said 70. It just doesn't work in our brains.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But the way they do it is so different because it's multiple wives. And none of those kids go, that's my mom, that's my stepmom. They go, those are all my moms. There is no separation. They are community driven. Yeah. And it's beautiful to see that community, to see communal upbringing, to see the kids running around us, and one kid gets bumped and sits on the floor crying, and it's one of the sisters or stepsisters or whatever it is that picks it up. It's not the mother running to come fetch it. Kids are doing the parenting or doing the consoling. Where do we get that now? We have our kids that go, even my kids, Stephen, my youngest one, today met a little kid and he introduced himself. He's like, hi, my name's Stephen. It's like, go, you good thing. That's amazing because nobody does it anymore.
No, of course not, yeah. I guess we all think, well, not all, but a lot of people think there's someone out there just to kind of not get you, but like, why should I say hello and introduce myself? But like, you could learn something from that guy like, in 2 minutes. Like, why wouldn't you want to do it? It's my philosophy. That's why I interview so many people, right? Because I just want to know and get to know so many different types of people and learn from different aspects of life, what they've experienced. Can I take that into my own life? So, yeah, I think the conversation and being nice it's weird we're saying this, but that is such a thing we need right now.
Yeah, and I think through podcasts like yours, you have this moment where you get an opportunity to not only enrich your life, other people can listen in and also learn, which I think we've become scared to connect with others, and we have to do it through a digital platform. And I hope that these sorts of things open up the fact that you can actually say hi to someone and go through those things, that we don't go to, what do you do for a living? Rather, like in Portugal, what I found here is so weird, is people don't say, what do you do? They say, what do you do for fun? Because what you do doesn't matter. What you do for fun is going to mean whether they like to spend time with you while you're having fun because they want to have fun with you. Because they're not going to do it at work with you. It doesn't make a difference if you're an accountant or a lawyer or the dustbin guy or a painter. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah. Very interesting, that, isn't it? What do you do for fun? But when did you ever hear that? I can't remember last time I've heard it. Just like in general conversation or even people I know. It's all about work, isn't it? Yeah, it's so strange. Let's go back to the Ranger journey. So you made the leap. How did that develop into, I guess, settling into that job and becoming good at it and liking it? Like, what was the journey like to maybe first stepping out of your comfort zone to start it, to being comfortable with doing it and enjoying it?
So first of all, I was in a 6-month course. So it's not a long course. It's not like you're doing a full degree or anything. It's not going to take the rest of your life. In fact, I've seen a lot of people from the States, from Europe, back to go do guide courses just to connect. Because you live in the bush for 6 months. It's a great connection.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper than staying at a five-star lodge, and you get true training with it, which is greater than what we think. But in going into what was my passion, what really made me tick, it unlocked, and I don't want to sound arrogant in saying it, but it unlocked some form of genius that when you like what you're learning, you don't have to learn it. It just sticks. And I think that's really where, if people can focus on those things of what they really love to learn, it's not learning. You're just taking part in it. And cruised through that, loved every minute of it, learned so much, and it's cool. I mean, it's fulfilling stuff because you're out on drive, you do walks, you learn tracks, you look at the insects, you look at the plants, it's about creating this whole story. And I figured out that nature is just this interconnected, interwoven, beautiful beast that has so much beauty and so much brutality at the same time. And each of them play their role in making it beautiful. When you watch something die, it's tough. But there's something really beautiful about it because it's this flow. The energy flows back through the system and back around. And going out of that course and going into the working world was a very difficult time because it was 2008 credit crunch. So the world had very much slowed down on their travel. So a lot of the lodges weren't hiring. So again, doors open as they need to. And I really feel like if you're genuine about your intent and your purpose, the doors will open. You just have to stick around long enough to figure it out. And somebody opened a door to a lodge, and I spent a couple of months there. Beautiful place in Kruger National Park. But me and the management didn't get along very well, and they made me dig a lot of holes and clean poop pipes with long things that I was climbing 6 feet holes to dodge the tidal wave of poo that was coming out of the pipe. You know, those sorts of things didn't really float my boat all that much. And it's this disillusioned thing where you could very quickly go, yeah, maybe I should go back to the corporate world. But I changed, and I ended up at a company called Sabi Sabi Private Game Reserve. And a lot of what I am today is based on that company. And again, I think hindsight's 2020. When you look at the progression of all the things, you see how each thing built you up to where you are at that moment. Like my degree put me in a perfect space to understand complex natural processes. My second boss taught me how to simplify very complex scientific things because the people reading the environmental impact assessment reports were not at the same level, so they needed help. So she taught me that. Then I had the guiding, I had the loss, I had depression to push me to the bush. So all of these things moving along. And I remember going through this whole process of manifesting a job. I was ready. I'd been there 8 months, very negative. It just wasn't working out. And I wrote a 4-page manifestation, everything down to the last detail of what my room looked like, that I was going to meet my wife there, blah, 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 blah. I went through it all. And within a period of 7 days of writing that, I had handed in my resignation and got the new job at Sabi Sabi. So it was this beautiful, like, okay, cool, you ready? Let's go. And off I went on this little journey. I remember driving through the door, phoned the lodge to say, okay, where do I need to go? And this young lady picked up and I was like, she sounds hot. We've been married for 7 years now. 10 years next year. And our eldest is 7 years old and loving our lives. So, you meet all these things. And I spent 5 years at this lodge honing my skills. I loved photography. At that stage, it was a hobby that I got to practice and be part of, because we were out on safari for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. You got your camera with you. You see the most amazing things. All you have to do is point at it and hopefully you get something.
Yeah.
And I just got locked into this photography thing. Never lost the naturalist side because I still wanted to learn more and understand more. And I connected with people and teaching them, and they kept my will to learn and my love for it open, because every time I told somebody something cool, and you see their face go, my God, really? And that was just like, put another log on my fire. I'm good. Let's keep going. And then the photography started to grow. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, you've got a camera. Do you need some help with your camera? I'll happily teach you. This is what I've learned. And so this all unfolded and I became better at photography. I read a lot of books, a lot of self-study, and I became a Nikon ambassador, all because the lodge, Sabi Sabi, had a relationship with Nikon in South Africa.
Okay.
So they took all my Canon gear and said, here's some Nikon gear. I was like, cool, I'll take that.
Take that, yeah.
And you just want a few images? No problems. What copyright? Here we go, take that. You're a bigger company. You're going to put my name on it. I'm going to grow that way. And I took up this thought process of photography. I can only grow so far by myself. But if I leverage people who have a bigger following and a bigger reach and play the game with them, there's a great chance that I'll be leveraged up with them. So if we work together, there's this leverage thing. I've seen so many photographers, so many thought processes that people don't want to help other people. They don't want to share anything. So this is my art. It's like, guys, photos don't make all that much money anymore. Not unless you're an Agio photographer and you're getting a front cover.
Yeah.
But even then, those are few and far between, those gigs. So I just learned to teach photography and I shared. And eventually I went, okay, cool. I'm ready for the next step, because I'd reached a glass ceiling. Within the lodge, my next step was, I was already the head guide.
Mm-hmm.
The next step was to become a lodge manager, which is a backward step, because I'd be out of the bush and driving. Yeah. I'd be looking after the logistics in the hotel.
Spreadsheets.
That's not what I came here for.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm going to be a private guide. I remember my brother-in-law looking at me. He called me into the office. He's the managing director of Sabi Sabi, still is. And he looked at me and he said, you're marrying my sister-in-law, and I don't think you're making the right decision. Private guides don't make it. It's just, it's not going to work. I said, well, your pessimism is okay. This is what I'm going to do. And off we went. I went out and I did everything I could to try and facilitate it, because I also understood that you're not going to walk out of a thing and go, oh my God, next year's full, because people are booking a safari a year, 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
So I started doing real estate photography, took that photography element, and I was like, okay, cool. A family friend was an agent, a real estate agent. She said, go take photos of the houses. I said, cool, I'm going to go take photos of houses. And I got pretty decent at that, to the point that Sabi Sabi hired me back to do all of their lodge photography. And then I started dabbling in video. They said, well, come back and do a video for us. This is not too bad. I just keep plodding along and got my fingers in every single pie that I can find. And we'll make it work. And my wife had a steady job, and she was still working for Sabi Sabi. She still is working for Sabi Sabi, like 18 years down the line. And we have this amazing relationship with this company that still fills my heart, and I still book safaris there because I like going home.
Yeah.
Because it's go home. You meet all the staff, you get hugs, you get, it's just meeting family.
So, quick question at Sabi Sabi. What was your day-to-day job? I know it might sound a bit strange, but if you're a guide, does that actually mean you're taking people out who have booked a safari or a guide or a package with that company, Sabi Sabi, and then you, I don't know, take them out for a whole day, or is it a whole week? Like, what is your day-to-day stuff?
So these are private reserves, so they're pretty costly. Most of them are now, that lodge is probably about $1,200 US per person per night.
Oh, wow.
And just won the top luxury hotel in Africa and top luxury hotel in South Africa. So, I mean, it's a really prestigious place. There's a lot of them, and you have to know your way around it. But as a guide, people would book space and not book a guide. We were contracted to the company, and we would have our month set out. There would be a forward planner, and you knew you were driving for 8 days, then you'd have a night off, then you pick up new guests. And so you go, and you sometimes have the same guests for a prolonged period, but never more than a long stay would be like 5 days, would be a long stay. If somebody rocked up for 10 nights, you're like, what the hell am I going to show them for 10 nights? This is crazy. And that's just lodge guiding. And we would go out, you wake them up in the morning, you have coffee, and you have a 6 to 9:30 game drive safari. Then the people come back, and it's eat, sleep, safari, repeat. And the eating is intense because you have about 7 meals a day. You have your pre-game drive, you stop and drive for coffee and more snacks. Then you have a big breakfast. Then you have lunch. Then you have high tea. Then you stop for drinks on safari and watch the sunset. Then you eat dinner and you roll to bed. But we did that. Then we'd take the guests for a walk, like an hour and a half long walk, and then have some time off. And then in the afternoon, sort of from 4 to about 7 p.m. into darkness, we would take the P M safari, and then as you ended, you had the spotlight and you were looking for some of the nocturnal creatures. And then you would sit with the guests at night for dinner, and you would discuss the day and really just mingle, not just, you would now entertain rather than
Yeah.
And then you go to bed and start the whole thing over again.
So after doing that for a period of time, like you said, you then done the photography. That's going to be the next question. How did that fit in? But you explained that. So then I guess you were thinking, well, because Arc Earth comes in somewhere. So I guess that is your own company to effectively do the same thing as Sabi Sabi, but on your own terms or your own way of doing it.
Yeah. So instead of booking with a lodge, which we still, as Arc Earth, we book people on journeys. So I'm busy with the booking now. I sent the thing off. Honeymoon couple, they want to do Cape Town and safari. So we book the hotels. I don't come anywhere near them. I just use the experience that I have in each of the spaces to say, I've spoken to you. I see what you want. This is what I think you should do. And people go ahead and do that. Mm-hmm. But as a private guide, what we do is we actually go with the guests. So we book the whole experience from start to finish. We'll have a conversation like you and I are having now and find out what they're wanting. Most people don't really fully understand what they want. And you have to sort of limit, you keep the blinkers on, give them some choice, but not too much because that can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you go, this is where I think you should go. And we follow them from day one when they land in country till they leave the country. We are with them. We negotiate all the flights. We just there to make sure everything happens. I don't drive the vehicles anymore. I sit in the back with the guests. We let the local guides shine because they know the reserves better than I do. They do it every day for 10 hours a day. Why would I compete with that? Mm-hmm. But as a private guide and with the experience I have across many different spaces, I have this broader knowledge and maybe a little bit more depth of knowledge because of time that I can string it together. So we go from one lodge, say, a Mashatu in Botswana, which is a beautiful place, great for leopards, lions, got sleep-out hides and elephant hides. So you see lots of that. Mm-hmm. And then we go to, say, Sabi Sabi, where now we want to concentrate on rhinos because the other one didn't have rhinos. So I will tell the guides, don't go chasing the big five because we've already seen this here. We want to go do this. So let's just do a drive where we concentrate on rhinos, where we stop at a pile of poop and I talk about poop and how that influences their whole life. And then we look at the food that they eat, and then we look at the habitat. Okay, we're going in here, and then suddenly you find it. So you get this very broad spectrum thing rather than going to 4 different lodges where each time you go to a new lodge, the guys are like, oh my God, we got to find them at Big Five. So a private guide basically just makes people feel comfortable with the journey. And I think, like, I was in L A and San Francisco in March this year, and I travel a lot. But landing in a new country, in a new city that you've never been to, is unnerving. And having that one person to just grab your hand and say, you're okay, follow me, takes all that stress away. What do I need for tomorrow? That person's going to tell you. No thought process, no reading your itinerary, and no figuring anything out. That's what we provide. And then on top of that, if people are photographically oriented, I sit with them with photography. Sure. I'll teach them in the vehicle while the animal's there. I'll say, do this, change the settings, do this, shutter speed up, watch out for this, look at your composition, let's see your image, run through all of that bit. And then when we get back to the lodge, I sit and edit with them and give them constructive feedback and say, you could have done this. Wear the feet on this animal. You've cut the feet off. It's silly, simple things that people don't get to learn. So it speeds up that learning process. And again, I think the photographic side, in order to be a really good photographer, you have to understand the animals that you're doing because it's a chess match. I can't tell the lion, listen, buddy, won't you sit up on that termite mound, just show me this side, okay, with your eyes now. There's none of that. So I have to see that he's going to do it and be in that position for when he does it and have everyone ready for that moment when he does.
That must be incredible at the end of the day if you help people through their photographs and you look through them and they're like really happy with a few of them, like, oh, wow. That must be a pretty incredible feeling as well.
It's amazing. I love watching people capture those images and go, oh my God, I took that. I was part of that.
Yeah.
And it gives them a sense of accomplishment. I think we're all looking for things, and a lot of people are building books now. When we do the private trips, we build a book for every guest that does has a private guide with them.
Yeah.
And we'll take the photos. So people who aren't interested in photography can just be present. They can put their phones away because everyone's trying to take photos with their phones and they never do anything with them. And we make a book, a beautiful book. Here's one.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible. People on YouTube can see that, but people who listen, there's a photo of a gorilla. Yeah. That's amazing. So for Arc Earth, I was going to ask, this might be a bit of a broad question, but what type of experiences do you offer? You mentioned the big five there, and obviously gorilla trekking is probably one of them, but can you name potentially what people could look out for you, for their tours with Arc Earth?
We customize everything to specific people. So we don't do group travel. I still work with an amazing company that I have for 10 years called Natural Habitat Adventures based out of Colorado. And they're amazing at what they do. And I would never even try and compete with group travel with them because they're just so much better at it. Yeah. We like to focus in on a family trip, a honeymoon trip, a group travel, or friends that want to travel together. And we will have a chat with them and say, what have you done? Where do you want to go? What are your thoughts? And then build something specific around that. But where we want to do a little differently is we want to travel with purpose is our catchphrase, our slogan. But it really is about trying to connect people with those spaces. So we're always trying to include some form of conservation activity, some form of activity that's going to reconnect people with nature. Because I feel like by doing that, we teach so many people about climate change and caring about the world and seeing something outside of their normal realm. They'll hopefully go back and spread that. But we also do these rhino dartings where we put radio collars, artificial intelligence radio collars on the legs of rhinos to help them not be poached. It's a preemptive way of not having them poached. It learns their behavior. It sends back information. And the guests are not just watching it. They're part of it. They're holding the syringe and putting stuff in. They're cutting the notches in the ears, obviously with the vet sitting there telling them what to do. They're not just handed the scalpel and saying, yeah, start carving. They get the D N A. We put microchips in the horns. We collect D N A for D N A sampling that goes onto national databases. We look for programs that are going to give people a little bit more. And even if we can't get to a conservation activity like that, as a guide, I will hopefully fill people's heads with enough information that they go, oh, wow, this is worth saving. This is worth being there. And it wasn't just a memory and a bunch of photos that we'll go back with. They go back changed.
How did you decide which country to go to? Is that based on what they want to see?
Yeah, and maybe where they've been before, based on, there's so many misconceptions about what places are like. And again, I'll bring this honeymoon couple up that we've just finished an itinerary for. They'd been told, let's go to Kenya and see the migration. I love the migration. I've just come back from a trip to the migration. But I'm spoiled as a South African and somebody who has done extensive safaris in South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, where you don't see a lot of vehicles. And when you go to Kenya and Tanzania, you may have 150 vehicles that are crossing when they're crossing the river. Or there may be 50 vehicles around a cheetah when it's about to hunt. And that is unnerving. And without a private guide, I don't want to send people just on their own there, because the misconception that they come back with and the story they will tell when they come back will be very different to if I was sitting next to them and be able to say, this is too busy, let's go to another spot and find something else. Where the local guides will just take them to try and tick the list, rather than give them an experience.
Yeah.
So we base all of that based on those factors, on what they want to see. Gorillas is a huge part of it. So, even places like that, we go to. Uganda is cheaper than Rwanda. Rwanda is very expensive. But the experiences are life-altering. The moment you stand next to a gorilla, a 500-pound, like a 250-kilo gorilla is standing next to you, and his arm is as thick as your waist. And you're going, oh man, you could snap me like a little toothpick. And he just sits there and goes, and that's all he does. He's super chilled. Chilled.
How do they see us though when you're sitting there? Do they just see us as like, brother and sister, cousins, like, or are you intruders? Like, how do they view you and the guests you've got just sitting there with them?
Such a great question, James. And I've had two major viral videos out of gorillas, and people, it's obviously, it's an amazing experience. And when they see the video, it makes them quake in their boots because King Kong is there.
Yeah.
They have been habituated for 2 to 2.5 years before clients come in, before tourists come to see them. And the habituation process is a lengthy period because they need to learn to trust us, because we've wiped the numbers out. The numbers dropped as low as 200 individuals left on the planet. We're now over 1,000.
Okay, that's
so
good.
Tourism has had a majorly positive effect on their numbers and how we perceive them, because they're worth more alive than dead.
Yeah, 100%.
And the value of them is so much higher. And that 2-year period, 2.5-year period is long in the beginning. It's as scary as hell for the rangers that go in there. It's not me. I would love to do it. But the guys go in there and they embrace arms like this with a stick in their hand, and they're like, don't run. And the family comes in charges. They want to kill them. And then they realize, okay, these guys are over 2 years, realize nobody's going to do anything. To the point that I had one of the local guides tell me a story. One of the lady rangers in Rwanda, and they're so beautifully trained, and it's really nice to have female guides on these trips, just for a little bit of nurturing energy, especially within a gorilla sighting that it's so close. And she was telling a story about a silverback or family of gorillas that they were moving along the edge of the forest wall, and they're moving along the silverback, showing them the way, and he stops, and they have this very clear communication. And one of the communications is up, which is, stop, don't come closer, stay where you are, it's a no-go.
Yeah.
So he started chuffing. So they all stopped. Guy pulled the guests back and they stopped 20, 30 meters away from the gorilla, and he was there, and the whole family came past, and each gorilla that came past, he chuffed at each one, looking at them and chuffing. And eventually the whole family had gone past, and they kept looking at the group and the guides and chuffed and chuffed and chuffed. Eventually the guide was like, you guys stay here. I'm just going to go see what's going to happen, because this is just weird behavior. It's not normal.
Yeah.
And as she got closer, there was a poacher's snare. And he would not leave that poacher's snare until his whole family and the group of guests had gone past, so he could keep them safe.
Right.
So I hope that explains a little bit into the insight of how they see us.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel, is they understand we're part of the thing. They know who the local guides and the trackers are, because they tell them very clearly, you stay away. The guests, you guys can pull in, come close, let's touch you, tap you on the bum. I had a guest who their rain pants were ripped right off of them. It looked like a bad strip show.
That's a lesson learned there about, you say, how they see us. We can learn a lot from that, about how he's looking out for not just his own kind, but the cousins to the left of him or right of him.
Yeah, exactly. And it's truly, again, just being on the ground with those creatures, looking into their eyes, you see their soul. There's no other way to describe it, and you just see inside them.
Quick break, travellers. If you're loving the Winging It Travel podcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more travel content and behind the scenes footage. If you're on Instagram, please give me a follow at Winging It Travel podcast for some daily travel inspiration, podcast clips, and an insight into my own travels. And finally, if you've got a moment, if you're listening to this or watching it on Spotify, please rate the podcast on your preferred podcast app. This is free and helps the podcast gain a bit of traction going forward. Cheers.
Can you explain the viral TikTok videos? Obviously, I've seen them, but just for people who are maybe not aware or not on TikTok, what actually happens in these videos?
Yeah, so, I mean, the first one is a big silverback gorilla, and I was filming it with a GoPro 360, which was nice because it gave a very different perspective, and the perspectives have made a lot of the difference in why they went viral.
Yeah.
And you see this gorilla walking, and I'm telling people to get their feet out the way because he's coming past, and there's nowhere to go. You know, we try and keep 10 meters distance between you and the gorilla, just for the safety of them, for the safety of us. They're so closely related that we can pass on our diseases, so we wear face masks.
Yeah.
And this is a big part of that whole thing. So anyway, they float through, and just everyone was like, oh my God, that thing is enormous, because it is enormous, but you get the real sense of how big the animal is just in that video. And then the real viral one that went stupid on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube just went silly. There is a gorilla, and it was raining. It was so cold. We had a massive downpour. We were all wet. The gorillas were all wet. They'd hidden under the trees and just sort of stood there. And to warm up, the silverbacks will do their chest beating. So he'd done it like 4 times. And I knew he was going to do it again. So he kept going. And we'd somehow jumped past him. We were following another gorilla, and we jumped past him. And he walked straight down to me. And one client was in front of me on the other side of this tiny little open clearing, maybe 10 meters across, and he stopped 2 feet away from me.
Yeah.
So I just recorded, and again, perspective. He looks enormous, and he starts and then he does his chest beating, because they've got these laryngeal sacs in their larynx, which they inflate to get the chest beat, which gives the popping sound.
I see. Got it.
And in the video, I actually describe it. It's so funny. I mean, I think the reason why it went viral is because everyone's like, yeah, those air sacs, they're called lungs. And there's the sarcasm that comes out of people because they don't know any better. But it's a nice way for us to educate people.
Yeah, sure.
No problems. Throw the bad comments out. I have no problems. It just gets more people to see it and more people to enjoy it and be part of that experience. But he goes straight past the guest and then stops next to her. And then I call her around, and the whole family converges on him. She had the best experience of her life. And it was just, it's amazing. It's amazing to be part of that and to see people's faces after that has happened.
Yeah, I can't imagine the the electric vibe after experiencing that, and you probably get back later on to the camp, whatever. I'd love to be there as a fly on the wall just to hear the conversation about what you've just seen and captured as well on video.
I mean, again, I think the sense is this overwhelm. A lot of the time, people actually just go back and sleep because there's so much adrenaline that's just gone through you. Yeah. Even if you're not the one being charged, even if they're not charging and they're just being Canadian dope smokers and just sitting chewing leaves, doesn't make a difference. They can be the most relaxed things on the planet. But just being with them gives you this rush of wow. And you need a moment to process that. And it's a very chilled thing because sometimes the walks can be pretty difficult. You can hike for 6 hours up volcanoes, down volcanoes, through muddy sections, ducking and diving under bamboo, and it can be tough. But the fulfillment on the other end is just monumental.
Yeah. I mean, that's the draw, isn't it? To get something booked in with you guys or whoever, but just to get that experience. So it's so unique. Like, it's beyond comprehension for somewhere like North America, where you're not going to get anything like that, really. Yeah. I mean, there'll be some great wildlife, but like gorillas, especially, right? So I can see why people would want to book, especially private tours as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a niche market. There's we're not aiming at everyone, although we can help a lot of people realize their dreams. But it's expensive as soon as you throw a private guide in the mix. It's an exclusive thing. But I also think the value that comes along. I would never do a travel to another place without a guide, because I know the value that I should give on a trip, and you would just never learn the same amount without somebody who has been there and done that and been part of it.
Yeah, I agree. Something you mentioned earlier is quite important, poaching. How big an issue is there still that you might see on your tours or the countries that you're working? Is it under control? Is it out of control? Like, where are we standing right now, do you think?
So I think when it comes to different creatures, we're just stuck with different realities. Okay. The rhino stuff that we're doing now is vitally important, because when I was still in the lodges, I saw 17 poached rhinos with their faces hacked off. And I shed many tears and probably still have a bit of P T S D hidden inside, because it's a massacre. It doesn't matter if it's a rhino. It's just seeing that is not nice. I'd rather watch a lion jump on a buffalo because I know that's normal. But seeing something else is not. And we've lost 75% of the rhino population, the white rhino population, in a span of over 10 years. And that is heartbreaking. I remember starting and doing safaris where rhinos were effectively a trash big five item. You didn't even look for them because you were going to see them. Yeah. In fact, you'd probably see 10 on a drive. In one sighting, I remember seeing 28 rhinos in a crash. One crash of rhinos. Wow. But it was amazing. Yeah. And now we're doing safaris and we're seeing more leopard than we're seeing rhinos. And leopard, I never saw a leopard for the first 16 years of my life. They are that elusive. And now that whole table's turned, because a kilo of horn is worth $60,000. So a lot of the places like Kruger National Park and the bigger reserves have chopped off their horns. Big philanthropists put in a lot of money and they chop them all off. And they grow back like fingernails. They are effectively fingernails with a little special inside them, but we don't need to go through the special. But they're fingernails. They grow back. About 2 kilos of horn is made every year, and they are braided against rocks and things to sharpen it into that point we see. And just being able to see them without the horns is cool. But I watched them straight after that dehorning. There was one rhino that had a horn and 6 that didn't. And they were all walking up to that rhino, and they were all vocalizing, which rhinos are not, they're vocal. They can be vocal, but they're not often. And these guys were overly vocal and walking up to the one with a horn and going, all this confusion as to like, why do you still have a horn? Where's mine gone? And it plays a role in their social status, and they use it to tap and do things. So we have to do what we can to drop the value, because it's an important part of it to try and keep the species alive. I've just come back from Kenya where we saw the last two remaining female northern white rhinos. They're the last two individuals on the planet, and they're trying their best to recover the species. But they have to artificially inseminate, and then they have to use a southern white rhino as a surrogate.
Okay.
And they need a sterile bull who can tell them when she's on heat. I mean, this really in-depth process. So poaching is real. I reckon about 30 elephants a day are still being poached. But no one's complaining too much about that. I mean, Namibia's just culled a whole bunch to feed people because there's such a bad drought.
Right.
Because there's not enough elephant in the world, but there's too many elephants in the reserves that they're in because they're overpopulated. And they have their old migratory routes have all been cut off by people.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody's complaining because the reserves really don't mind a little thinning of the herd, if we put it in such a blunt way. But then you still have pangolin, which is the most trafficked animal on the planet, a little scaly anteater that's really beautiful, really rare to see. But they just shoot off to the far east, and they're utilized in medicinal and processes like that. Fortunately, gorillas, like I said, that whole poaching effort there has ground to zero because the animals are worth more alive than dead, so that the economies are willing to support and protect them.
Yeah.
And there's not enough to really sneak a gorilla hand out. Ashtrays, fortunately, smoking has dropped off a lot. So people used to use their hands as ashtrays. That's what they were being poached for.
What?
Or people wanted to put the animals in a zoo. So they wanted a baby. So they have to kill the whole family because the family will die for that baby. And then they move it to a zoo, and a mountain gorilla cannot live in a zoo. You cannot see a mountain gorilla in a zoo because it dies within 3 months. Because their food source is too varied and they can't survive those conditions. So, yes, it's a problem. It's part of what I believe just going on safari or going to these places does is people are creating value for that animal to be alive rather than dead. It is supporting a system that is not just animal-centric, it's people-centric, because without people's buy-in, you will never save the animals. So we need people to be educated. We need people to get jobs, to find a way to live their purpose. And we need to teach the kids the value of what is in front of them and make them fall in love with it so that they too can protect it or say to their parents, that is wrong. It just is.
Do you think we'll get back to, that's quite a broad question with all the different animals, but are we on the right path? Do you think we'll get back to good levels of each of the animals that you may have mentioned there? Or do you think, that's hard to predict, isn't it? But do you think something else needs to change for us to get back to the levels that they're actually needed to be at?
So the animals themselves are really great at what they do. When I see a rehabilitation center where they have a breeding project, it's like, guys, they've been making babies for millions of years, quite successfully. It is not their lack of ability. Maybe a panda needs a little helping hand every now and again because they really seem to suck at it. But everything else has a much better understanding of making babies.
Yeah.
All they require is the space. And the space is where it is. So Rwanda at this point in time, there's huge amounts of funding going into buying back tracts of land from locals at a fair price, moving them to a new space where they'll get a deed and a house and access to schools and access to plots and upskilling of those people so that they can expand the forests. Because if they left the forest the way it is, there's just too many gorillas. Then you run into another problem. Then they'll self-regulate. They'll start killing each other because there's too many territorial disputes. So you've got to start opening it up. And it's really about space. It's about space. And we were talking about the Maasai and their large families, and then they graze their cattle. Goats and sheep and cows are their life. It is their measure of wealth. It's everything. And I was chatting to a Maasai now, and they're trying to change the way they perceive it. They don't want to take that part of it away. But they're saying, instead of having a zebu cattle, let's go get a Brahmin, which is worth 4 times as much. Then you only have 20 cattle instead of 80 cattle.
Got it.
Which takes the balance. And this is the way we have to think about it in different senses, because we don't want to lose those cultures because they're invaluable. There's things there that we all should be privy to. But it's finding the way to create space for these animals, and specifically corridors to migrate. For elephants, it's corridors. We need to open up river pathways. We need to get them to places so that when there's a drought in Kenya, they can walk down to Zambia. And it sounds crazy, but they would have migrated thousands of kilometers, and that would have regulated. Babies that were weak would have died. The old would have died. It would have been part of that process. And so you move that process forward. And I do believe that we can get there. It just is going to take a lot of thought. It's going to take a lot less of how can I care about me rather than, or more thinking about how can we look after the community and the livelihood of everything. And again, it's about those communities going, we love the elephants. We'll let them pass through here and we'll move away here so that they can get there. But then big corporation, we need water here because we can't go to the river, and finding those balances.
So it's collaboration is needed between what seems like quite a few parties, government, local people, corporations like you mentioned there, and of course the animals.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. The animals will fit in where they can. You give them space, they'll grow. A great example is rhino. So the southern white rhino was written off as extinct in the late 19th century. And they said they'd all been hunted out. And they found a very small population of about 50 animals in a park in South Africa called Shishlui and Folozi. And every single southern white rhino on the planet comes from those 50.
Oh, wow.
They
there you go.
Put them into Kruger National Park in 1960 in small batches, 6 here, then 12, and the numbers are a bit off, but it was small batches. By the time the poaching epidemic started, we were up to 12,000 white rhino in Kruger National Park in 50 years.
Wow.
So you create space.
Yeah.
They'll fill it.
Yeah. God, that's amazing.
Nature is amazing like that. I even heard a research study that was being done on leopards around KwaZulu-Natal. There was a lot of hunting going on around there, and the people wanted trophies, so they wanted a big male. And every time a big male came out of the reserve, he got shot and hung up on somebody's wall, which I still don't understand, but off we go. And what happens is a territorial male protects a territory. And if he dies, a new male comes here, he kills the cubs. So the cubs kept on dying off. Then they stopped the hunting in that area, said no more. Within months, the females were like, babies got to 6 months old, and she was like, bye, off you go, live your life, and have more babies, because they knew that this was an opportunity. And they started speeding up that process because they knew that they needed to get the genetics out as fast as possible. How did they know that?
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Almost beyond sort of a lot of people's comprehension and study, really. There's loads of examples of animals doing weird things. Like, how'd they know that? But that's another podcast episode, I think.
Yeah,
that'd be quite cool. That'd be quite a cool podcast, actually. I'm sure there is one. Just analysing the specific animal behaviours in certain animals, that why or how they know how to do that while they're doing that specific thing. Could be anything from spiders building webs, but why have they made it this size? Or could be anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's incredible. And almost endless amount of knowledge to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we can learn a lot from that, I think. For Arc Earth, to finish on there, can you tell listeners and the viewers, where can they find out more information about you guys, potentially book a trip, or just to get a conversation on the go?
Visiting our website, arcearth.net, is a very easy way. It's ARC Earth. Authentic, responsible connection is how we came up with our name. It was our core values that we shortened, and we wanted to be that authentic for everyone that goes, responsible in that we make sure that nothing is being harmed, and we're trying to uplift everyone along the way, and then reconnecting people, connection back to nature. So they can get on there, send us an email, rich@arcearth.net, or my business partner, Matt, M-A-T-T, @arcearth.net. And all our social channels are open. All of our contact details are there, and we're happy to help people decide and move forward through these things and create some memories and hopefully connect you to nature just in a bigger way than you ever have been, and take it back home, go and spend more time in the forest, see more things and see it in a different way.
Awesome. I'll put links in the show notes. And next, I actually want to go to a bit more personal travel. And my first question is, what are some of the misconceptions about traveling in Africa? So I've never been, right? It's a big blotch on my travel C V, which I need to sort out probably next year, hopefully.
I know somebody who can help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I'm just thinking that I reckon a lot of people, even travellers themselves who've not been to Africa, or they've been probably other places, probably think, is it difficult to travel there? Like, what are some of the misconceptions you think people have that maybe you've learned, maybe some comments you've had on your guests, like, do you know what? I didn't realise this was good, or this was easier, or anything you can share that might help the listeners?
Absolutely. So I think Africa is such a big continent. I think people don't truly realize just how big a space Africa is. And there's always things about, like, Ebola pops up and everyone's like, oh my God, we can't go to Africa. But if you go 6,000 miles down south, you're quite far away from where the problem is. You should be okay. People put Africa in one big bubble. Yep. So as soon as one thing happens in Africa, they think it's the whole continent. And that's the biggest misconception. There is a lot of unstable instability in certain countries that doesn't make it great to go. But just going to the next door country can get you the most stable space in the world. And I'll give an example. The Democratic Republic of Congo has a very bad name for all of the atrocities, for all of the rebels and everything like that. Rwanda is right next door, and it's probably one of the safest countries in the world. And it is run like nothing else in the world. It is based off of Singapore, and on the last Saturday of every month, the entire community has to go out and clean their streets. So you can eat off the pavements. It's so clean. And I think finding the right spaces to go, even safety, like South Africa, where I come from, in the suburbs where we lived, safety was an issue. Part of the reason why we're in Portugal is the safety of my family while I'm traveling. But I still send guests back there because where we send them is not the suburbs. It's not the places where these things are going. You're in the middle of a reserve, surrounded by the most amazing guards called lions, leopards, elephants, and they look after you. And you're quite far off the beaten track. Botswana right next door is very underpopulated and beautifully safe and easy to travel around. And a lot of these spaces just have more to offer than anyone would expect. And a lot of it is dining driven. Like, people just don't know what they're going to eat. You'll eat some of the best food you've ever eaten in your life.
Yeah.
Your wine down in Cape Town, where you can go on a wine route and hop on an e-bike and cycle from wine farm to wine farm and then just pray that you get home safely, because that can be dangerous too. But there's so much to explore in Africa, and so many different things, from the deserts of Namibia, which are stark and landscape driven and absolutely beautiful, to what I term the Garden of Eden, which is the Okavango Delta, to the ease of South Africa, because the safaris are easy. It's great for first timers. The timings are shorter, where when you go to Kenya, Tanzania, you may be spending 8 to 10 hours a day in a vehicle chasing game, which can be very tough on the body. Seems so ridiculous that sitting down and looking out at nature can be hard work, but you are surely by the end of that. Exactly. And then going to somewhere like Zambia, where you may want to, you're a walker and you want to explore a little bit more, where you can get out on foot and walk with big game and have really qualified guides that are going to look after you on long walks, and you do 10, 12 miles in a day. Each space has its own beauty, its own something, and that's what we do. Is we've traveled all of these spaces. Matt and I have over 30 years of experience together in Africa, across the board, outside of Africa too, Madagascar, South America, Australia, and we understand just by speaking to people as a job, that's our job, is to know people. Just by speaking to people, we can point them in the right direction. And I think that takes a lot of people's stress away when they're not making the decisions themselves, where they can trust somebody to say, go here, here, and here, and you'll be good. And off they go.
I think that's true value, especially with someone who's interested in traveling to Africa as a continent, to speak to guys like you who've got that experience, but can also be honest with them. Because I think a lot of people would think, do you know what? If I'm going to speak to some guys and they're going to try and sell me their biggest tour or their most expensive tour, there's a bit of trepidation there because like it's business driven. But if you've got guys like you that actually want to be honest and produce a quality conversation about, well, we think you're best for that, I think that's the true value, because people can trust you then to give them the right direction and not just based on finance or money or business, right? Which is quite rare. I don't know. A lot of travel tour companies go for the, I guess, a lot of big companies go for the finance driven stuff, right? But the nuance that you provide, that's the true value, I think.
Yeah, and to that point, James, it is an unfortunate part that most of the places that are the best to visit are the most expensive. And if there's one tip that I will give anyone, you don't have to come to me, but don't shortchange yourself on just a cheap trip. It's not a cheap trip. You're traveling a long way to get out there. Rather go and have quality time in a high-end reserve that's going to show you everything, and do it with responsibility, than do it where you're driving yourself around Kruger National Park lost. You may see some cool stuff, but you'll never understand what you see.
Yes.
Or you're in a vehicle with 40 other people and you'll never have the personal touch that you will in a smaller reserve. It is just an unfortunate part that it's got expensive. But I believe that too, low density, high income tourism is far more valuable to the animals.
100%.
And nature is a privilege that the local people that live in those areas should be afforded the ability to get there, but no one else has a right to it.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing for over-tourism as a whole across the world, but definitely obviously what you're describing there as well, because maybe up to COVID, we had this like out-of-control tourism, I think. Maybe it has actually had a good effect about just resetting a little bit.
There's no doubt that there's a good effect, but I think so many people go, oh, that's just too expensive. And I had a postman on a very expensive trip. He saved his whole life to come on that trip because it was his dream. So nobody can say that they can't afford it. They just need the reason to save the money to get there. And it's better to wait 3 years and make sure that you can afford a decent trip than half-ass it all the way down the road.
Yeah, great point. Okay, love that. And just maybe quickly 3 countries in Africa maybe to dip their toe in if you're first time visiting the continent. You mentioned South Africa there.
South Africa definitely is a beautiful space. Easy to get around and not a lot of vehicles and a lot of variety. So you have everything from beach to wine farms to incredible culinary experiences, and then obviously safari. The Okavango Delta is Garden of Eden. In June, July, August, when the Delta floods, the desert floods from waters that were rained in Angola in December, January, and have flowed down, and it just turns into this amazing tapestry and play out of nature. And the gorillas, just wow. It is a once in a lifetime experience. It is truly expensive. I mean, in Rwanda, it's $1,500 for 1 hour. I think it's $1,600 now for 1 hour with the gorillas for one trek. So it is expensive.
Yeah.
But it is worth it. And when you go, you do too. Because you don't want to hedge that bet.
Yeah.
And then they're walking and you're trying to keep up with them in the jungle. It's not fun.
No. Good point. Yeah. Okay. And what travels or tours have you got coming up yourself for 2024 going into 2025?
So fortunately, 2024 has calmed down to a panic. So I'm at home for a little bit, but next year I am going to Namibia for 3 weeks. I'm going to Kenya and Tanzania for 2 weeks to see the green season part of the migration, so they don't cross the river. They all calve at that time. So all the babies are had, and it's just predator action left, right, and center. Then I'm doing Botswana and South Africa. I'm doing Botswana and Zimbabwe, and I'm doing about 8 gorilla treks.
Wow. Okay. Busy year.
So 2025 is a full year already, and people trying to squeeze extra time is not working very well. So we're actually looking mostly to 2026. And most of these safaris, we're booking that far in advance, at least a year and a half in advance, in order to get the space in the best lodges that have the most competitive pricing, but also that are smaller. I don't want to be in a 100 sleeper lodge. I want six tents where people are lost. They feel like they are lost.
Yeah. That's good to know, actually. I didn't ask that question about how far in advance. I mean, obviously I didn't know too much, so I thought maybe you can book for next year, but it's clear to hear that you are booked. So people need to understand that for you guys, especially, that it's like maybe 18 months in advance.
Yeah. I mean, we still have other guides that have space, but personally, myself and Matt have exhausted our time. And I think post-COVID, there's been a lot of late travel. So last-minute travel, 1, 2, 3 months out. And that's cool. We can still find space for people to travel on their own. And most of that stuff, I'd push them towards South Africa and Botswana, just because it's so easy to get around. It's manageable and it's not overwhelming in that sense.
Okay. And what's the best time of year to travel on some of these tours, or is that different for each country?
So I think the best time of year is based on budget, one, and your ability to get away. And I think in North America, your summer holidays have always been the key time, and that means it's peak season in Africa, and lodges double in price. So places that were charging $1,000 a night are now charging $3,000 a night because it's so busy. And I like the shoulder season. So April, May is a shoulder season pre the big rush, and September, October is shoulder season on the other end of that. And April, May is beautiful because it's still green from the summer rains, and you get some discounted prices. Winter's always a great time, which is Northern Hemisphere. It's summertime, just because it's so dry and animals are under pressure, so that you see more, you can see through things. But if you're going to quality reserves, any time of the year, you'll see epic stuff. And then for photography, I really love the December, January period. It's hot as Hades.
Okay.
Really high. I mean, we're talking 40 degrees centigrade, 103, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And you have thunderstorms rolling in, but those clouds and the greenery of everything is really powerful for photos. And it's just a cool experience. And for the most part, it is much cheaper because it's off season. So you can dial off and do things, and the animals still move around in the rain. It's one of the most amazing experiences when you are sweating balls because it's so hot, and a thunderstorm rolls in and dumps everything on you, and you're just like, that was cool. And it's gone. And you keep going. You stick your poncho over. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad gear.
Bad gear, yes. That's a great point. I love traveling off season. I would always travel, if I could, off season or shoulder season. I think that's probably the best, like you say. Yeah, I'm all for that game, 100%. Yeah, I know a few people going in December and January, so there you go. They're going to experience that.
Great time. Yeah, great time.
Okay, and just personally travel, have you got anything that's not related to work or Africa?
Some family travel. We've just come back from South Africa, going back to see the family and touch base with our roots. I recently was in the Pantanal helping out with some guiding stuff there, but it was a dream trip for me. And for me, I would love to see every wild space on the planet and experience it at least once.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a great aim.
It's a difficult point to push towards right now because we've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. But we're really concentrating on Portugal, just trying to see the country we've moved to, get a real good feel for it. And we can start moving abroad, and we're going to Canada soon and hopefully get some snow there because my boys have never seen snow.
Oh, okay, wow.
And
you're guaranteed
that will blow their minds. Yeah. So we're in a good space. I just want to travel. Any chance I get, let's just go, whether it's a road trip or a plane. I just want to go somewhere new.
Okay. I'm going to ask you more about that in a second. I just want to finish the episode on the silverback documentary that you've had recently. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So again, this is related to Natural Habitat Adventures, the company in Boulder, Colorado that I've spent 10 years with, and they're amazing. They have incredible budgets. They've got incredible ethos. So a lot of what we've crafted Arc Earth around, I learned a lot of that through working with them. And they started doing films, and during COVID, we set out to add value again. I wanted to bring safari to people and still add value, and I spoke to them and I said, okay, cool, let's do a virtual safari. And I went to Botswana, I went to Sabi Sabi again because we got epic rates. They all wanted to be, it's just free marketing for places.
Sure.
So they were cool. And as a Sony Alpha ambassador, I brought one of the filmmakers from there on. And NatHab said, listen, we've got a new filmmaker. Can we send him with? So I said, cool, yeah, absolutely. Nicest guy I've ever met. He made an amazing movie called Chasing Coral, or was very heavily involved in it. It's on Netflix, and it's about coral bleaching, and the footage is off the charts. And we spent some time in Botswana, and we had a little bromance. It was just like, this guy's awesome. I could spend a lot of time chatting to him. I think I found a new best friend. And he said, well, we should make a movie. And we chatted about this, and then he chatted to NatHab, and the next thing I knew, in 22, he was coming on a guerrilla trip with me, and we were going to make a documentary. And I still remember as a kid having or as a young adult having a manifestation board, wanting to create a documentary, be a wildlife documentary filmmaker.
Amazing.
And
dream,
here I was filming the gorillas, and he was going to use some of it in it. And not only that, I was part of it, and they wanted to hear my story, which is incredibly humbling and awesome. And I just hope that people can get inspired by it. In order to be an inspiration, you have to be inspired. Yeah. I'm inspired to live my life in the best way I can.
Where can people find that documentary?
You can look up the Silverback or go to NatHab. It's called NatHab, is the shortened version, their YouTube channel, or nathab.com. And there's some amazing trips there. Again, a lot of group travel that makes it a little bit cheaper to move around, but some of the world's greatest guides with them. It's a cool movie. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it, and I'll put the links in the show notes. And what you say about that, about filming, actually, just very quickly, just because of this conversation, now my little dream is to come on one of these tours or treks that you do, and just a podcast in real life. So I try to do this when I travel, right? So my trip coming up, I'm going to be doing this. I try and interview local people because I feel like I want to get a local perspective. I also want to interview people I travel with, or if I meet. So it could be like people on the tour, or people like yourself, who maybe have experienced that, but also the guides like yourself. I want to get that perspective. So I'm thinking like the future of the podcast, really. But I tried to do it last year, a few lessons learned. But I want this whole experience of being a wholesome, 15-minute episode, 20-minute episode, just in this place. And you're going to hear from different types of people from a different perspective on the same trip. That's like kind of what I'd love to do in the future for different things. But this is obviously one of the key things I'm thinking now I'd love to do.
Amazing. And again, I think your way of wanting to do it is so enriching, because while you're getting it for yourself too, the understanding and the knowledge and the perspective of that, you're also sharing it with a broader audience, which is so important, I think, for the whole world to understand these things. And there's so many places that we can take you, James. I think
it's incredible.
We could keep doing. You could never leave Africa. We could just change your whole podcast to Africa and its cultures, because there's so much.
It's the next big place for me as a continent. No mention is huge, right? But I've travelled to obviously Asia and 5 continents. There's 2 missing. One classic is Antarctica, but obviously that's a different trip. And there's one big one in the middle which I've not gone to, which is Africa. So it's the next big part of my travels. I think going into my next 5 to 6 years, I think it's going to be a concentration. I can't wait. Cannot wait.
Amazing.
There you go.
Amazing.
Can you tell the people the services you provide for photography as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point in time, we're wrapping our heads around a lot of the stuff. I've done a lot of webinars. There's a lot of content on our YouTube channel. Busy processing a book right now, so hopefully that will move through and start to come to light in the early next year. But the biggest thing for me is that gets us far and wide. But if people want something far more tailor-made, we book a safari based on photography. There's a new so there's another trip we're busy trying to organize now, where there's a reserve called Mashatu, and they've just opened up a brand new sleep out hide. So you actually sleep there. You have 2 safaris instead of being in the vehicle. You're in the hide and you sleep there at night. And it has different lighting settings, so you can switch lights on behind, so you get backlighting of anything that's coming at night, or side lighting, or front lighting, and you have all on remote, and you can create these amazing images with magical African skies. I can't even tell you what the African sky is like. It feels like the stars are going to hit you on the head.
It's giving me shivers.
It's just about being in those spaces, and we really focus in. And I then just we take everyone. I've taken everyone from an iPhone photographer to world-class photographers that have won the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. We've done some pretty serious people. And while they don't need to be taught how to use shutter speed, they often are outside of their element in terms of where they are and how we can get the best shots and which reserves we can go to where we can climb out on foot and have wild dogs run past us. And then they stop and they're 20 centimeters away from your face and looking at you, and you can shoot with a wide angle lens and create these really beautiful images.
Sounds incredible. Don't worry, people. I'll put all this in the show notes. So I'll put the links in so you don't get lost. And you also host a podcast called the Wild Photography Podcast. I assume it's about what you discussed today, but in word form, I guess, in conversations.
So that wasn't my podcast per se. That's another friend of mine. His name is Court Whalen, and he's based out of the US, and he also has an epic podcast. I've featured on it a few times. That's why it popped up on your research. Got it. And it's a great place to learn photography. He's got a great way about it. He's a PhD and just a super smart human and just wanting to get conservation and wildlife on the page. So happy to give his podcast a big shout out too. I mean, he's a good friend of mine.
So it's like learning how to get better at photography, mixed in with some stories, I guess, of your experiences, et cetera.
Exactly.
Amazing. Okay, and just any social media, I guess you're Arc Earth for Arc Earth, but also you've got a personal Instagram account as well.
Yeah, Richard de Gouveia. For all of the others, will get you to Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Follow, send messages, be kind. If you're not kind, that's also cool. I just go past it. But it's really about connecting people and trying to educate people. Again, the reach of how many people we're actually going to get on safari is limited, and I totally understand that. And I would still, my idea of social media is to reach the people that will never get there and make them fall in love with something that they'll never get to see, but they'll hopefully want to save.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, and we're going to finish the episode with some quickfire travel questions. So these are just like some random questions I ask you about your favourite things you've seen worldwide, could be personal or work travel. I'm going to kick off with, you're not going to like some of these, I don't think either, but we're going to do them.
Really.
Top 3 favourite countries, not including your own.
I would have to say Namibia, Uganda, because the people are so friendly. And I'm going to throw Brazil in there because I've done one trip there, and it was such a breath of fresh air. It's such a huge country, and the people were so friendly and everything, and I just take one out of Africa.
Great. Okay. Tell me 3 countries you've not travelled to that are next on your hit list.
They all require wildlife viewing. So South America to Patagonia to see the pumas and walk with them and photograph them on foot. Wow. It's torn between the US and Canada for bears. So polar bears definitely on my list.
Okay.
But a bit of Glacier National Park and bits and pieces like that where we can go and see some grizzlies and have them walk past like the gorillas do. That gets my adrenal glands pumping a little, which I quite like the idea of that. And then I'm torn. India is definitely there for tigers, but also snow leopards.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. You should come here if you want to see grizzly bears. We just have some wandering down into North Vancouver, into people's bins and black bears. Yeah, it's a bit crazy.
Exactly.
We sort of live amongst them really in North Vancouver.
Amazing.
Okay, what about if you could sit somewhere in the world with a cup of coffee and just watch the world go by? Where are you going to sit?
I think one of the most enchanting places, I'm going to give you 2 because it's two different thoughts. One of the most enchanting places I've ever visited is Windy Impenetrable National Park, where the gorillas are. The forest, being in a jungle like that, in a rainforest like that. The sounds, the feel of it, the energy that's in it. I just want to go in and get lost and just be in that space for a while. And then the deserts of Namibia also capture me. I had an experience a few years ago where it was the first time I've ever experienced true silence. Like
True.
not
Yeah.
a single noise, not a chirp, not wind. The only thing I could hear was my breath, and it was so loud I had to stop myself breathing until I couldn't do that any longer. And it was magical. So I would just love to immerse myself in that a little bit more because it was very powerful.
Wow. That's also a great question to ask. Have you actually ever experienced true silence? I think, top of my head, the only thing I can imagine, I was in the deserts in Oman, but there were other people about. But if you take that out, just the nature, it is about as silent as I can remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it might be the next time you hit a desert that you separate yourself from all those people. And that's often, again, that's what we do is we go, okay, guys, there's no one else around. Go sit 50 meters away from one another.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to get you besides the dryness. Just cream up and you're good.
Yeah.
And just go sit. And people leave moved. Without seeing anything or hearing anything, they leave changed.
Yeah. Something to be said. What about 3 favorite cuisines worldwide?
I love fish. Anywhere where I can get really good fish. And funnily enough, now in Kenya, we had some red snapper that blew my mind away. You don't think of Kenya so close to the coast, but it's close to the coast because we know it is migration. It's just a bit weird. So that would be one. My death row meal is a hamburger. So wherever the best burger in the world is, I'm down. And in ratings, there's one that's about 20 kilometers away from me that was rated one of the best burgers in the world. And I still haven't got there in a little town called Labush. And then something new. So my favorite cuisine on top of that is trying things that I've never tried before.
Yeah, key. Love that.
There's a barrier to that, but I still like some of the things might gross me out, but I still like to try. I try anything at least once.
Okay. And if you could live somewhere tomorrow for a year and you've got to stay there for a year, where are you going to live?
Probably say Thailand.
That's a popular answer. Okay. And I agree. Yeah, I'd love to. Okay. This is going to be an interesting question because of what you told me. Are you a sunrise or sunset person?
Sunrise. I love early mornings. I love the sound of a dawn chorus. And I love the sensations, the sensory input that happens there because there's that bite. You can smell all the plants are open. Everything's waking up. There's this real beautiful energy about sunrise. So I love watching the sunrise.
Awesome. Okay. Penultimate question is going to be, has there been anywhere you traveled to that you didn't like?
Yeah, I think sometimes the big cities like Nairobi and the bigger African cities don't really float my boat. Wherever there's too many people, I want to get away from it. Okay. I feel like it's crowded. So big cities are not my thing, even though I've done a little bit through Europe, but it doesn't tickle my fancy.
Okay. And the last question is, what are some words of advice or wisdom you could pass on as to where someone should travel, whether that is out of their comfort zone or to somewhere new, and why they should get out there, make the leap, and experience something completely different?
I think the biggest change that people can make in their life is by exploring places and people they've never met. I think travel makes us wise. It makes us tolerant. Makes us understand that we do not live in a box and that other people survive by not doing the same things as us. And that nature heals. We're stuck in a world with mental health issues, with depression, I often have that darkness chasing me, and the way that I get past it is go sit in nature, and it takes it away almost immediately. Just immersing ourselves in that and connecting is a beautiful thing that we should all be forced to do.
Okay, Rich, this has been an unbelievable conversation. If I could describe it in one word, which is hard, I'd say inspirational. I think you've inspired me to kind of question my own travels in terms of where to go next and what to experience. I think you've had that big influence on me, and it's been a great chat. I've learned so much about you, what you stand for, your tours, your companies in the short hour and a half that we've had. But I get a really good feeling that you're a great guy, you're doing great things, and long may that continue.
Thank you, James. And thanks for hosting such an amazing thing. Again, to reach new people, it's a beautiful thing that you do. And we need more voices and more people connecting the world together with positive messages. So thank you for all you do.
Totally agree. And thanks so much for your kind words. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode on the Winging It Travel podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on all social media channels at Winging It Travel podcast. And finally, please leave a review. I do love to read them. This is a Voyescape Network podcast, and there are other awesome podcasts on the same network. So be sure to check out my podcast and others at voyescape.com. The link is in the show notes. And thanks for tuning in. Get your backpack, pack it up, book a flight, and let's go and wing it around the world. See you next time.